"You're late," my mom said as she stepped onto the porch, pulling her suitcase behind her. I glanced at the clock on my dashboard, 6:02 a.m. 2 minutes late. "Mom," I forced a smile, stepping out of the car to help with the luggage. But then I saw her. Emily. My sister emerged from the house, dragging her own suitcase behind her. My smile froze. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice steady but tight. My mom turned to me, her expression far too cheerful. "Oh, Olivia, we decided Emily should come instead of you. She's been really stressed lately, and she needs this trip." My chest tightened. "Instead of me?" "Mom, I've been planning this for years. I paid for everything." She waved a hand dismissively, as if I had just pointed out something trivial. "And we're grateful, sweetheart. But you're always working so hard. You can take another trip later. Emily needs this right now." Emily didn't even have the decency to look guilty. She just smirked, shifting her weight onto one hip. "Thanks for understanding, sis," she said, her voice dripping with fake gratitude. I stared at them, my heart pounding. My dad walked out a moment later, avoiding eye contact as he handed me his suitcase. "This is unbelievable," I said, my voice shaking. "This was supposed to be our trip. Something for me to share with you." "Well, it still is," my mom replied with a smile. "Just with Emily instead. Don't make this a big deal, Olivia. Your sister really needs a break." I clenched my jaw, biting back the words burning on my tongue. Instead, I forced a tight smile and opened the trunk. "Let's get going then," I said flatly. If they wanted to prioritize her over me, fine. But I wasn't about to let them enjoy it. The drive to the airport was suffocatingly quiet, except for Emily's incessant chatter. "Oh my God, Mom. Did you see that TikTok about New York? I can't wait to go shopping there. Do you think we'll have time? Or will the tours take up the whole day?" My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. I stared straight ahead, forcing myself not to react. My mom chuckled softly. "Of course, sweetheart. We'll figure it out when we get there." We. They didn't even seem to notice that I wasn't part of that "we" anymore. At one point, my dad cleared his throat. "Thanks for driving us, Olivia. I know this probably feels unusual." I glanced at him in the rearview mirror, raising an eyebrow. "Unusual is an interesting way to put it, Dad." He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, probably wishing he hadn't spoken at all. Emily leaned forward from the back seat, her voice grating on my nerves. "You're not mad, right? I mean, this is really big of you. Letting me go instead. I could never have afforded this on my own." I clenched my jaw, forcing a tight smile. "Of course, Emily. Enjoy the trip." By the time we pulled up to the airport drop-off zone, my patience was hanging by a thread. As I helped unload their luggage, my mom pulled me into a quick hug. "Thank you for understanding, sweetheart. This means a lot to us, and to Emily." I nodded stiffly. "Sure, Mom." Emily beamed as she wheeled her suitcase toward the entrance. "Thanks, Olivia. You're the best." I stood there, watching them disappear into the terminal, my chest tight with anger and hurt. The ride home was a blur. My mind replayed every word, every dismissive shrug, every casual betrayal. This means a lot to Emily. Dash, you're always working so hard. Dash, you can take another trip later. I parked in my driveway and sat in the car for a long moment, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Then, without a second thought, I marched into the house, pulled out my laptop, and logged into every travel account I'd used to book the trip. Hotel reservations? Canceled. Tours? Refunded. Flight upgrades? Gone. I watched as confirmation emails flooded my inbox, a slow smirk spreading across my face. They wanted to take Emily instead of me? Fine. But they weren't going to be staying in luxury hotels or enjoying private tours, not on my dime. When I closed my laptop, a deep sense of satisfaction settled over me. They could explain themselves to the front desk staff in New York. I was done being their doormat. The calls started as soon as their flight landed. My phone buzzed relentlessly while I unpacked my suitcase, the one I had packed so carefully for a trip that was no longer mine. The irony wasn't lost on me as I hung up my dresses and neatly placed my shoes back on the shelf. The buzzing continued, filling the room with its relentless vibration. I sighed, picking up my phone and glancing at the screen. Mom! Her name flashed across it, accompanied by a stream of missed calls and texts. I scrolled through the messages. Mom, Olivia, what's going on? The hotel won't let us check in. The reservation is missing. Call me immediately. Mom, this isn't funny. Fix this now. A laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Fix this? They really thought I would swoop in and save the day after what they had done? The phone buzzed again. This time, a call from Emily. I let it ring out, only for her to leave a voicemail. I pressed play, and her sharp voice filled the room. Olivia, this is so petty. We're stuck here because of you. You need to call the hotel and fix it now. I rolled my eyes and deleted the voicemail without listening to the rest. For years, I had been their fixer, the one who smoothed over every mistake, who picked up the slack every time they let something fall through the cracks. Not anymore. Eventually, I decided to answer, if only to stop the barrage of calls. The moment I picked up, my mom's voice hit me like a tidal wave. Olivia, what did you do? The hotel says the reservation was canceled, and none of the tours are booked anymore. I let her rant for a moment before calmly replying, yeah, I canceled them. Silence. Then, a sharp inhale. Why would you do that? Oh, I don't know, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Maybe because you decided to take Emily on my trip? You're lucky I even drove you to the airport. We thought you'd understand, she snapped. Understand? What dash, Mom? My voice rose. That years of saving and planning didn't matter because Emily needed a break dash? That my hard work meant nothing to you? Guess what? I don't understand. And I don't care to. I hung up before she could respond and turned my phone off, tossing it onto the couch. The silence that followed was bliss. Let them figure it out. The silence lasted only a day. By the next morning, my phone was buzzing again, flooded with calls and messages. At first, I ignored them. I spent the day cleaning the house, catching up on work, and, for the first time in years, enjoying peace dash. But by the evening, curiosity got the better of me. I turned my phone on and braced myself for the storm of texts. The first few were from my mom, each one growing more frantic. Mom, Olivia, you've gone too far. Your sister is in tears, and your father is furious. We can't get into any of the hotels you booked. Mom, I can't believe you did this to us. Fix it now. Then came Emily's messages. Emily, you're acting like a child. I don't get why you're making such a big deal out of this. Just call the hotel and fix it already. And finally, my dad. Dad, we need to talk. This isn't right. I set the phone down, shaking my head. For years, I had been the one to fix things. The one who made sure everything ran smoothly, who made sacrifices so everyone else could be comfortable. And now that I had taken a step back, they had no idea how to handle it. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table, letting the anger simmer. How dare they expect me to clean up their mess? How dare they act like I was the one in the wrong? The next call came minutes later, and this time, I answered. The second my mom heard my voice, she exploded dash. Olivia, this isn't funny anymore. We're stranded. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is? I took a slow sip of my tea. Embarrassing? You think this is embarrassing? Try saving for years, planning every detail, and then being told you're not even part of the trip you paid for. Stop being dramatic, she snapped. Emily needed this more than you. And now, she can figure it out, I said coldly. You made your decision, Mom. You wanted to take Emily instead of me? Fine, but don't expect me to fund her vacation. We're family, she hissed. We don't do this to each other. A bitter laugh slipped past my lips. Funny, I was just thinking the same thing. In the background, Emily whined, Mom, just hang up on her. She's being impossible dash. That was the final straw. Enjoy your trip, I said, my tone icy. Oh wait, you can't. Because it's not your trip. It was mine. And now it's nobody's dash. And with that, I hung up. For the first time in my life, I wasn't letting them take advantage of me. And it felt incredible. The next few days were blissfully quiet. With my phone turned off, I finally had space to breathe. No guilt trips, no frantic calls, no demands for me to fix things. I spent my mornings sipping coffee on my back porch, enjoying the calm I had craved for so long. My afternoons were filled with work, catching up on hobbies I'd abandoned, and, for the first time in years, putting myself first. But by the third day, curiosity won. I turned my phone back on, and within seconds, notifications flooded my screen. Over a dozen missed calls, multiple voicemails, and way too many texts. The first few messages were predictable, my mom's tone shifting from anger to desperation. "Mom, Olivia, you need to call me back right now. This has gone too far. Mom, I can't believe you're doing this. You've humiliated us. We're your parents. How could you treat us this way?" Then came Emily. "Emily, this is so petty, even for you. You're ruining everything. Just fix it, Olivia." And finally, my dad. "Dad, I don't understand what's happened to you. Call us back so we can sort this out." I hesitated for a moment before listening to the final voicemail. It was from my mom, longer than the rest. Her voice was quieter, but tinged with frustration and exhaustion. "Olivia, we're back at the airport now. The trip is ruined, and I hope you're happy with yourself. Your sister is devastated, and your father and I are, well, disappointed doesn't even begin to cover it. Call us when you're ready to talk." I stared at my phone for a long moment. Then, without a second thought, I deleted every voicemail. I wasn't ready to talk. And honestly, I didn't know if I ever would be, because this wasn't just about the trip. This was years of them putting Emily first. Years of me being expected to accept it with a smile. Years of being the afterthought. This trip had been the breaking point, but the cracks had been forming for a long time. That evening, my best friend Grace showed up unannounced, carrying 2 cups of coffee and an unmistakable look of curiosity. "I heard about what happened," she said, setting the coffee on my table. "Your mom called me yesterday." Of course, she had. My mom had always been good at recruiting allies when she wanted to guilt me back into line. "And?" I asked, taking a sip. Grace shrugged, a sly smile creeping across her face. "I told her you were probably busy and would get back to her when you were ready." I laughed, shaking my head. "You're the best." "No, you're the best," she said, her tone suddenly serious. "Because you finally stood up for yourself." "I know how hard that is, Olivia. Don't let them drag you back down." Her words stuck with me long after she left. Grace was right. I had spent too long bending over backward to please people who never seemed to care about my efforts. It was time to break that cycle. By the weekend, I felt a strange sense of clarity. The anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface, but it was joined by something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Freedom from their endless expectations. Freedom from being the family's fixer. Freedom to finally live life on my terms. But as expected, the silence didn't last. On Sunday afternoon, my phone rang again. This time, it was my dad. I stared at the screen for a moment before answering. "Olivia," he began, his voice heavy with weariness. "Your mom wanted me to call. She thinks you'll listen to me." I leaned back in my chair. "Go on." He let out a long sigh. "Look, this has all gotten out of hand. Your mom's upset, Emily's furious, and, well, it's just a mess. But you're better than this." I stiffened. "Better than what, Dad? Standing up for myself? Refusing to let you walk all over me again?" "That's not what I meant," he said quickly. "It's just, you've always been the reasonable one, the one who keeps everything together. This isn't like you." I let out a short, bitter laugh. "You're right. It's not like me. Because for once, I'm not cleaning up your mess." He was silent for a long moment. Then, finally, he spoke. "You're punishing the whole family over one decision, Olivia. Is that really fair?" I almost laughed. Fair? You really want to talk about fair, Dad? I asked, my voice rising. Was it fair When you and Mom decided I wasn't important enough to be part of the trip I planned, Dash? Was it fair? When you replaced me with Emily like I didn't matter, Dash? That's not what we were trying to do, he said, his tone defensive. We just thought Emily needed it more. Of course you did, I snapped. You always think she needs more attention, more support, more everything, Dash. And I'm always the one expected to sacrifice for her. Not anymore. Silence. Finally, he exhaled. I don't know what you want me to say. I shook my head. I don't need you to say anything. I just need you to understand. I'm done being the afterthought. From now on, I come first, Dashed. And before he could respond, I hung up. For the rest of the day, I let myself feel everything. Anger, sadness, relief. It wasn't easy, but it felt like the start of something new, Dash. I wasn't the family's fixer anymore, and I wasn't going to be. They could figure out how to clean up their own messes. When my parents and Emily finally returned, I was waiting for them. I parked in their driveway, sipping my coffee, feeling, surprisingly, calm as their taxi pulled up. As they stepped out, dragging their suitcases behind them, their faces were a mix of exhaustion and irritation. Emily was the first to speak. Well, I hope you're happy, Olivia, she huffed, crossing her arms. I raised an eyebrow, still seated on the porch swing. Happy about what, Dash? Our trip was a disaster, Dash. My mom snapped, waving a hand as if to brush the whole experience away. We spent the entire week in dingy hotels, eating terrible food, because we couldn't afford anything decent, Dash. And she turned to Emily, exasperated. Don't even get me started on the tours. Oh, wait, Emily added, voice dripping with sarcasm. There weren't any, Dash. I took another sip of my coffee, letting their complaints wash over me. Sounds rough, Dash, I said finally, my voice calm. But you wanted to take Emily, remember? I'm sure you all had some great bonding time. Dash, that's not the point. My mom's voice rose, frustration turning to full-blown anger. You knew we couldn't afford all the things you had planned. You set us up to fail, Dash. And that was enough. I stood up, setting my mug down on the small table beside me. No, Mom, I said, my voice firm. I didn't set you up for anything. I planned a trip for the three of us, something special, something I spent years saving for. You are the ones who decided to cut me out at the last second. My dad finally spoke up, his tone quieter but no less accusatory. You didn't have to cancel everything, Dash, Olivia. That was extreme. Was it? Dash, I folded my arms. Why should I have paid for a trip I wasn't even invited on? If Emily needed it so badly, Dash, maybe you should have planned it yourselves. You're lucky I didn't cancel the return flights. Emily rolled her eyes. You're so dramatic. It's just money, Olivia. Dash. And that was the final snap. I turned to her. My patience shattered, Dash. And you're so entitled, Emily. I shot back. Do you have any idea how much work and sacrifice went into planning that trip? Or do you just assume things magically appear for you because someone else always takes care of it? Dash. They all fell silent. For years, Dash, I had been the responsible one. The one who planned things, fixed things, made sure everything ran smoothly. And for years, Dash, they had taken it all for granted. That's not fair, my mom started. But I held up a hand, cutting her off. No, Mom. What's not fair is how you treated me. You chose Emily over me like always, Dash. So I chose to stop being your doormat. You didn't want me on the trip? Fine. But you don't get to enjoy the benefits of my hard work without me, Dash. I grabbed my bag from the porch swing and turned to leave. I'm glad you're back safely, I added, my voice steady. But don't expect things to go back to the way they were. I'm done, Dash. As I walked to my car, I heard them calling after me, their voices a mix of anger and guilt. But I didn't look back. The drive home felt strange, Dash. Peaceful. For years, every visit had left me feeling emotionally drained. But this time, I felt lighter, Dash. I had, finally, said everything I'd been holding in, and for the first time in my life, I didn't care about their reaction. The moment I stepped into my house, I felt it. Peace. No suffocating guilt. No second-guessing myself. Just the quiet, satisfying knowledge that I had, finally, stood up for myself. I made myself a cup of tea and sat on the couch, replaying the confrontation in my head. They had been so sure I'd fold, that I'd give in, like always. But this time, I walked away. They could be angry. They could be hurt. They could be embarrassed. It didn't matter anymore, because I wasn't living my life for them anymore. The next day, Grace called. "How'd it go?" she asked, skipping the pleasantries. I laughed, leaning against the kitchen counter. Exactly like you'd imagine. There, furious Emily's pouting, and my mom is probably trying to figure out how to guilt-trip me back into line. Grace snorted. "Let her try You've got a backbone now, and I'm here to make sure it stays in place." I grinned, feeling an overwhelming sense of gratitude. "Thanks, Grace. I mean it. You've been my rock through all of this." "Anytime," she said, her voice softening. "So, what's next for you? Now that you're not playing family fixer anymore?" That question had been circling in my mind since the confrontation. What was next? For years, my energy had been poured into trying to please my family, trying to earn their approval. Now that I had let go of that burden, the possibilities felt endless and a little intimidating I don't know yet, I admitted, but I feel like I finally get to decide. Not them, not anyone else, just me. Grace let out a satisfied hum. Sounds like the start of something amazing and for the first time in a long, long time, I believed her. Over the next few weeks, I made small changes that felt big in their own way. I redecorated my living room, swapping out the hand-me-down furniture from my parents for pieces that felt uniquely mine. I spent weekends exploring local cafes, parks, places I had always meant to visit but never made time for. And I started journaling, writing down my own thoughts and dreams without filtering them through the lens of what anyone else might think. Each step felt like reclaiming a part of myself that I hadn't even realized I'd lost. One evening, I sat down with my laptop and opened the spreadsheet I had used to plan the trip. The canceled reservations stared back at me, and for the first time, I didn't feel a pang of regret. Instead, I felt a spark of determination. That money had been meant for a once-in-a-lifetime experience, and I wasn't going to let it go to waste. Closing the spreadsheet, I opened a new browser tab and typed solo travel ideas. A few weeks later, I booked a flight, not to New York, to Italy. It wasn't about proving a point anymore. This trip? This was for me. The moment I stepped off the plane in Rome, a strange mix of excitement and nervousness settled in my chest. I had never traveled alone before. For years, every vacation had been planned with my family in mind, accommodating their needs, adjusting to their schedules. But this time, there was no schedule, no compromises, no one else to consider. Just me. I checked into my hotel, a charming little boutique place in the heart of the city, and dropped my bags onto the neatly made bed. Then, for the first time in forever, I let myself breathe. No frantic calls, no last-minute changes, no Emily hijacking my plans. This was mine. That first day, I wandered the cobblestone streets with no real destination. I marveled at the ancient ruins, sipped espresso at a tiny cafe tucked away in an alley, and let the city pull me into its rhythm. No one was rushing me. No one was demanding my attention. I could just exist. The next morning, I booked a spontaneous cooking class. By afternoon, I was standing in a cozy kitchen with a group of strangers, laughing as we fumbled our way through making fresh pasta. The instructor, an elderly Italian woman named Sophia, nudged me as I kneaded the dough. "You are traveling alone?" she asked in her lilting accent. I nodded. First time. Her wrinkled face broke into a warm smile. "Ah, brava The best way to find yourself is to get lost somewhere new." Her words stuck with me. For years, I had been so wrapped up in making everyone else happy I had no idea what I actually wanted. Now, standing here, flour dusting my hands, laughter filling the room around me, I felt something shift inside me. Maybe Sophia was right. Maybe I had needed to lose my place in my family to finally find myself. A few days into my trip, my phone buzzed. For a moment, I debated ignoring it. But curiosity got the better of me. It was a text from my mom. "Mom, hope you're having a nice trip. Maybe we can all talk soon." I stared at the message for a long time before setting my phone down. I wasn't ready to reply. And that was okay. This time, it would be on my terms. A week after I returned home, my mom called. And this time, I answered. "Hi, Olivia," she began, her tone unusually soft. "How was your trip?" "It was amazing," I said simply. "That's good to hear," she said, pausing, as if searching for the right words. "We've been thinking a lot about what happened. Maybe we handled things poorly, dash." The admission surprised me, but I wasn't ready to let her off the hook just yet. "Poorly, dash," I echoed. "You replaced me on a trip I planned and paid for without even asking." "Poorly is an understatement, dash." "I know," she said quietly. "Your dad and we didn't realize how much it would hurt you." "And Emily?" I asked. "Does she feel bad too? Or is she still blaming me for ruining her vacation?" Dash. My mom sighed. "She's upset, but I think she knows she could have handled things better." Dash. I leaned against the counter, exhaling. "Mom, this wasn't just about the trip. It's about years of putting her first and expecting me to pick up the slack. I'm not doing it anymore, dash." There was a long silence. Finally, she spoke. "We don't want to lose you, dash." Her words tugged at something deep inside me, but I had learned enough not to let guilt dictate my choices. "I'm glad to hear that, dash," I said. "But it's going to take more than words to fix this. I need to see real effort, not just apologies, dash." "You will," she promised. "We'll give you the space you need, but I hope you'll let us back in someday." After the call, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief that they were finally acknowledging their behavior, and skepticism about whether they would actually change dash. But as I sat down with my journal that evening, I realized something important. Whether or not they changed, that wasn't my responsibility. What mattered was that I had changed. In the following months, I kept my boundaries firm. I responded to their calls and texts when I felt like it, but I didn't go out of my way to fix things. Instead, I focused on me. I signed up for a photography class, something I had always dreamed of doing but never had time for. I joined a local hiking group, and I started planning my next solo trip. Each step I took felt like reclaiming another part of myself. One evening, as I sat on my porch watching the sunset, I realized how far I had come. I wasn't the person who bent over backward for people who didn't appreciate me. I was someone who valued herself, someone who set boundaries, someone who wasn't afraid to stand up for what she deserved. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly free. I planned and paid for a luxurious one-week trip to Europe for my parents and me, but they decided to take my unemployed sister instead.